cats, cops, and C4. The drug pursuit ended up a bust. Not that they hadn't found it. They did. It's just that it had been sold in borderline microscopic quantities across a dozen different universities and schools of all sorts. They had found that it was being sold as basically a study aid energy drink, a few grains per cup of water or other drink, and it was about an hour of manic focus. Also, apparently, slobes were unaffected by them, but there were about a dozen served up as dealers. Once Cherikoth got talking, she really got talking and gave them everything they needed. Also, a lot of the slobes were far from intelligent. Most of them were really young and honestly didn't know better. Cherikoth was going away for a long time. The distributors, on the other hand, were getting lesser sentences in exchange for their cooperation. Unfortunately, the fact that the methamphetamines had been distributed and so widely at that, it meant that addiction across nearly 6% of all higher education facilities on the planet was going to be a problem. Sure, the buyers had taken a borderline microscopic dose and used it more like caffeine, but caffeine was addictive too. The distributors were being encouraged to give up the information on other suppliers in exchange for a sentence reduction. It was somewhat working, and 4 other drug labs had been found. None of them had the symbol of the Shroud in them, though, so it was just something that Cenk was only vaguely advising on. And all of his advice was neatly summarized in a voice recording of, "Drug labs are full of volatile and toxic chemicals to a human physiology. Be very, very, very careful. And if you can get them outside the lab, scan it with drones first. It's almost impossible to be too careful in a situation like this." Still, his focus, or rather Linda's focus, and as her deputy he followed her lead, was on the Shroud. The angle of the drug lab was fairly simple: profit and influence. However, the fact that they so quickly and willingly cut off Cherikoth was very interesting. They claimed to view things like a game. That was interesting. They said that they didn't want the innocent involved. That's laudable and pragmatic. Something the undaunted can't give and they can't get through legal means. That would normally imply that it's some kind of item, illegal and perhaps dangerous to have. But this doesn't feel like the setup to a robbery. Cenk says to himself as he enters Linda's office and sees the massive board of possible suspects she's put up. At the center of it all is an image of a hooded figure with a hidden face, the best they had on the Shroud. He considers and he feels he's onto something. Oh, son of a bitch. The Shroud isn't any of them but influencing all of them. What? Linda asks. Come over here and look at your board from this angle, from further off, he says, and she rushes up beside him. Now, the lines are lines of benefit. What does that say about the Shroud? That they have potentially hundreds of different people in debt to them. But why? Why indeed? But it fits. It's something the undaunted can't give, and they can't get legally. Personal leverage over numerous politicians and peoples of influence. That's the prize. Not the money, not the chaos, and not the drugs. I'm willing to wager that if we look into it, there are a few politicians that benefited from the meth being used to bump up grades, making them look good to the voters. Politicians that will look even better if they now shift their focus to combating illegal substances. Or maybe rivals that will eclipse them if they do. The violence, the stolen goods, the drugs, it was never the ends but the means, Linda says in wonder. How did you put everything in just such an arrangement that it became obvious from a distance? It's a good theory, but how is it that the Shroud can't get this level of influence legally or from the undaunted? Because this is a combination of blackmail and political favor, which is massively illegal, but they can't get it from the undaunted, because even if they were to gain such power, it would be superseded by superior orders. The Shroud wants power for themselves and isn't picky how they get it. Money is one way, violence another, and manipulation a third. It fits. All right, so how many people does the Shroud have influence over? That's the question. How long have they been actually operating and how widespread are the next questions? Your board here already has the Shroud holding enough power to be a major force in spire politics, potentially swinging numerous votes one way or the other, but that's on one spire, in one precinct. No way someone this bold, versatile, and systematic has limited themselves that much. Cenk argues. Maybe we won't know for sure one way or another until we can ask some questions of the Shroud's contacts, if we're even correct in these assumptions. The Shroud's plan could be anything, and therefore, that entire board could be worthless as all of it is accidental and just not avoided due to its potential use later. Linda tells him, and he sighs. Either way, deliberate or accidental. The Shroud has a small army of politicians in their influence. I think we may need to call in backup. There's only so much that a police precinct can investigate before the presence of the investigations destroy the evidence itself. I think we should leave out the spies. Evidence gathered without a warrant will not hold up in a court of law. Linda chides him. Well, we better wrap this up sooner rather than later before the spies involve themselves then. Even if I request them to stay out, it will just lead to them getting more curious and taking a look. Discipline cannot be that bad on the Dauntless. It's more that a situation like this would be too good an opportunity to pass up. Imagine if one of our spies could get control of the Shroud's contacts. Justice would be averted, but the Undaunted would thrive. Do I need to remove you from the case? Linda asks slowly. No. I've been loaned out to the department. My report about this situation will only go out when it's been resolved and no sooner. After all, an incomplete report is a useless one, Cenk says as he looks at the pattern on the board again. Still, the sooner we start wrapping this up, the better. The Shroud went from a danger to a possible asset to the more unscrupulous parts of the Undaunted. You admit there are unscrupulous parts of your organization? Linda asks in amusement. It's a military government. Those are two things that are never uncorrupted and together? Woo! Oh, we try. But the fact of the matter is, there's no way to get involved with things militarily or politically without getting dirty in some way. Linda says. Anyways, we need to get some more eyes on our theory and see if they can't poke some holes in it. There's likely a detail or 3 we missed and need to close up, Cenk says. Why did you admit there are unscrupulous parts of your government? Linda asks, blocking the door out. We have an intelligence division. They deal in dirt, uncovering or using it. Being unscrupulous is part of the job description for them. Half the rumors out of it make it sound like a madhouse that knows everyone's secrets and where mutual blackmail and assassination plots are standard greetings. I know for a fact that its 2 highest-ranking members have tried to kill each other multiple times. Why haven't they been arrested? They were on opposite sides of a Cold War at the time. Spy versus spy was all over the place, and those 2 were the 2 that wouldn't die, Cenk says as he stands back and Linda stares at him. At war? I'm sorry, I forgot that humans aren't we're as unified as any other race, but we have a lot less elbow room, so tensions boil over. A lot, he says, and she nods. And when the best of the best were sent out, it included information gathering forged in war, where the only rules were survive and win. We do a few more rules than that, mostly about not being the one to start them, no mass destruction, no pointlessly cruel weapons, and leaving civilians out of it, Cenk says, and she nods. Right. I'm sorry, you fit in rather well around the station, she says, stepping away from the door. He grabs her around the waist and pulls her in for a quick kiss. I think that's one of the most sincere compliments I could have gotten, he says, enjoying the feeling of her being so close, particularly the sensation of a pair of very large and perky breasts. There's a sudden alert to both of their communicators, and they break apart to examine it. A gang war has broken out a few levels down. There are already casualties. I'll get Vera, Chink promises, and Linda nods. The station is a buzzing hive of activity as officers grab their weapon holsters and quickly move around to form up their teams. Vera thankfully was already heading towards Linda's office, and Chink intercepts. They quickly head out, and in minutes they're blasting away to head down the spire. "Jesus Christ!" Chink exclaims as he sees the war from above. The flashes of lasers and cascading balls of plasma crashing into multiple sides as two blocks seem utterly intent on demolishing each other. That doesn't stop a huge amount of plasma blasts and laser bursts from screaming into the sky to try and shoot down passing traffic and arriving officers. "What the? Why isn't the plasma burning things?" Vera asks in shock as they set down a safe distance away. They must have shield generators behind some heavy barriers. The barriers stop the lasers and the shields block the plasma. But if both sides have it, then they've been getting ready for something like this for a while, Chink states as he starts looking around and then quickly approaches Chief Bowman. "Chief, I have an armory case with me. If you need heavy munitions, I have them." "How heavy are we talking?" Chief Bowman asks immediately. "My largest kinetic weapon is designed for hunting megafauna. It's also a serious threat to smaller ships. Largest laser and plasma ordnance are only anti-vehicle grade, unfortunately, and I also have a small armory of kinetics, lasers, and plasma weaponry, in addition to a full suite of separate demolition charges." Chink answers, and she just goggles at him for a moment. "What, did you run out of room for a grav tank?" "I prefer treads on my tanks, and yes, I'm working on it though." He answers, and she groans. "Our biggest issue is that both sides are really trigger happy with those barriers up. Do you have a safe way to get some kind of charge onto them so that we can scatter the gangs? If they're unified and motivated, they will get someone killed. If they're shaken, we can get them without casualties. I do have something like that. It's just been cleared for field use last week," Chink says as he withdraws a clamshell case from inside his jacket. The Axiom dances around it, and he reaches his hand far deeper inside it to pull out a large and strange rifle with a boxy configuration and numerous cables running along its length. He then pulls out several boxy magazines and clips them onto his belt before closing the case. This is the DEDs, the Distance Explosive Delivery System, aka the boomstick. It uses magnetic and shrinking technology in tandem so that I can safely and reliably launch powerful breaching charges with pinpoint accuracy. This is not a rocket, as the charges are not self-propelled. This is not a grenade launcher, as these charges are so large they require shrinking fields in order to be properly launched. Furthermore, the shots do not arc. This is exactly the appropriate circumstance of their use, the safe destruction of an enemy hardpoint without the use of artillery. Chief Bowman looks the gun up and down a few times before huffing. "Men on the battlefield, if it's not a porno or a comedy skit, then it's absolutely absurd." "You said that out loud, ma'am," Chink remarks. "I'm aware. All right, soldier boy, here's how it's going to work. I want prisoners in cells, not morgues. You are to destroy the shield generators, and if you absolutely have to, weapons and walls. We're going in non-lethal, but with shock ordnance saturation. Do you have barriers against laser and plasma fire?" "I do. It's integrated into my biology. I could walk between the firing lines, and the worst they would do would be stripping me naked." "Good. If you didn't have that, I wouldn't even be considering this. Take down those barriers, and if you're forced to engage any hostiles, I want a non-lethal takedown unless your life or the lives of others are on the line. Understood?" "Ma'am." "Yes, ma'am," Specialist Barnabas states in a fully military tone. "Good. Get into a proper shooting position. After that, only demolish the barriers on my mark." She orders him, and he nods before rushing off to the nearest building. The boomstick is strapped to his back, and he starts climbing the walls along the piping on the side.